Thanks, Igor. Yeah, I'm excited to be here today to talk about some of the new features of TeamCity. So let's hop right in and let's do that. Traditionally in TeamCity, when you're managing the settings for projects and build configurations and all the different components of your continuous integration process, and even beyond your continuous integration process, all those settings were stored within TeamCity itself. Now in version 9, not only can you store your settings inside of TeamCity, you're also able to take those settings and synchronize them with a version control repository. This can open the door to quite a few different things, and there's quite a few reasons or benefits why you might want to give this a try. For example, if you already have your code and perhaps even your database changes living in a version control system, it might make sense to also have the actual components of your build process live right alongside those other aspects of your project. It helps you get to that point where you have everything in one place and you have a nice history of all the changes of your application, not only just the application code itself and the database changes perhaps, but also in this case now, the build process. TeamCity does this by essentially synchronizing your settings with a .teamcity folder inside of a version control system. And all of the settings as you're making changes in the interface to TeamCity, as we'll see in a minute here, get committed into that repository. And you yourself can also make changes from the repository as well, which opens up one of the other benefits, and that's that you can actually perhaps share some of these settings between projects simply by copying files. And maybe if there's some simple changes you'd like to make to a build process, you could do that through a version control instead of needing to log into a web interface to do that. Yeah, so I'm going to jump in and show an example of that and just kind of walk through this process, and feel free to ask questions if something comes up. All right, so to demonstrate this, I think it's helpful to kind of create a new project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this existing project, and I'm going to come and create a sub-project. So again, projects and build configs are kind of like folders and files, if you will, a scheme of organization. The version control settings are synchronized on a project level. So I'm going to call this a VCS project sync project. So we'll just give it a creative name here to indicate what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and create that. So I'm creating a new sub-project. And then if you have TeamCity 9 installed, or if you're just watching here, you'll see that there's this new tab under the project settings that becomes available called version settings. Under here then, we have some options for synchronizing settings for this project into a version control repository. So linking it back to VCS is as simple as enabling the synchronization, and then using a VCS root, a concept that you're very familiar with in TeamCity already, most likely. And I already have one set up today. It's just pointing out a local Git repository, which, by the way, while I'm talking about this, support for this is available for both Mercurial and for Git at this point. So I'm going to pick this existing Git repository, and I'm going to say that that's where I'd like to synchronize the changes. All I have to do then is apply that. And then you'll notice right away I get some status information back about the current state of this synchronization. And then I'm going to hop over and actually pull up the history for this version control repository. Just pull up the log of this. You'll see, looking at the history of this VCS settings demo that I have set up, you'll see TeamCity made a commit, and it explained that it enabled synchronization in this commit. And then you'll notice there's that .teamcity folder, and inside of there are a few different XML configuration files that contain all the project settings. Okay, so anyway, so this is all the XML configuration you're already used to with projects in TeamCity. Historically, you could go into these configurations in the TeamCity setup, and you could even copy these and make backups of them. You could even modify them theoretically, but none of that's too convenient. Now with it in version control, you can come in and you could tweak little aspects of that, and we'll see that here in a second. I'm going to go back to TeamCity though, and let's actually go through the process of changing some things from the TeamCity UI, which you're already familiar with, and see how that carries back over to version control. So let's go actually into this sub-project, this VCS project sync sub-project, and let's create a build configuration. And let's just call this a test build configuration. So I can go ahead and create that then. And then let's say I want to add a build step. And I want to add a build step that does something simple like it just simply echoes out hello world. Simple enough. Go ahead and save that then. So I've done a couple of things in the interface to TeamCity now, and you're probably wondering, how does that carry over back to the version control repository? So let's go back to the log and let's look at what's been going on in there. As you can see, there's 2 new commits now. The first one, after the synchronization was enabled, says that we created a test build configuration. So nice, meaningful messages coming right out of TeamCity. So when you're making the changes in TeamCity, TeamCity's giving some meaning to the commit message as well. And so you can read that in your version control repository's history. And then the next commit thereafter was taking the test build configuration and adding, in this case, we were updating it. And specifically, you can look at the difference here and see that we added that command line runner to echo hello world. All right, so we can see that things are synchronized back and forth between the version control repository and TeamCity itself. Nothing too drastic, nothing too unfamiliar. And of course, we could also then run this really quickly and just look at that message. And then while that's running, I'm going to pull up that repository. And I'm going to actually go about, let's change the file and see things synchronized. So here is that repository on disk, and it's a local repository, so I can edit it here as well. And I can go into the build types, and here's that test build configurations XML file. So if I go ahead and open that up then, pull this over here, you can see I could change this to say something else. Instead of echoing hello world, I could say hello Wes. I can save that. And then I can check that into version control as well and say change message to hello Wes, and I can commit that. And then we've got one run here with the old message, and there's hello world. If I run this again then, give that a second to run through, now we can see it says hello Wes. So it's just a general overview that you can set up synchronization of your settings to a version control repository. And then you can keep using the TeamCity interface if you'd like to make the changes, but you can also change things from the version control repository itself, and TeamCity will pull in those changes on the next build's run. I'll take a second and pause just in case there's any questions that come up. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, maybe not. All right, a couple of things maybe to point out before I move on though. The one thing that isn't synchronized, so because we are synchronizing project settings, and I'm gonna go back to that point actually. All of these aspects of a project are going to be synchronized except the SSH keys. So that's one thing that doesn't get synchronized. Also, because it's possible that a password is stored as a component of one of the build configurations build steps. Say you're FTPing something and you need a password to the FTP server. Those will be checked in, but they'll be checked in garbled essentially. But you should be aware that the password itself is being checked into version control. It's not readable, but there may be concerns about the security of that as far as who has access to the version control repository, which does open up the door to the fact that you don't have to use the same repository to do this as your code. Now you could if you wanted to correlate code and build configuration changes one-to-one and see that all in one repository. But you also could, and it may be recommended to have a separate repository that just stores the build configuration itself, and then you can protect access to that repository. So if you have any concerns about passwords and security, you don't have to worry about that. You can lock out people that shouldn't have access to that information. Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to move on to the next thing we'd like to go over. So historically, if you had multiple TeamCity servers, and there could be various reasons for this, perhaps you had different departments using TeamCity a little bit out of sync with each other, so they have their own instances of TeamCity that do their own things. And at some point, they decide that they'd like to coalesce these servers into one. Or maybe in other cases, you have a testing TeamCity server and you have a production TeamCity server. So you're developing a set of changes for a project and its build configurations in your test server, and you then like to switch those over to the live server when they're ready to be used. So there's many different situations where you may have multiple TeamCity servers. Now, historically, that might involve moving XML files on disk. In TeamCity 9, though, you now have the ability to run a backup, say from TeamCity server A, take that backup, copy it over to an import folder on TeamCity server B, the one you'd like to move it to. And then within the web interface, as we'll see in a minute here, you'll be able to actually reference that backup and pull out the actual settings of a particular project and import it into another server. Just streamline the process, if you will. To demonstrate this, now I've got two TeamCity servers. I am going to go to the administration tab on one of them. This is the one we're going to move things to. And then I've got another one, and I'm going to go to the administration tab of this. Actually, I'm going to jump back for a minute. I've got this Linux build configuration. It doesn't do anything too exciting, but let's say I'm ready to move this to another TeamCity server for whatever reason. I can go to the administration section of this separate TeamCity server then. You can see the URLs are different between these two. And then I can go to the backup tab, or if you already have another process that does backups, you could go there. I can start a backup then, and then that backup will run on that server. And then once it's available, I can download that backup. Or again, if you have another mechanism whereby you're backing up TeamCity, you can use that. And while that's downloading, I'm going to hop back to, so this is my source server. I'm going to hop back to the target or the destination server. We go to the projects import tab. And then I'm going to go grab that backup. And I will show you where I'm going to put it at. Give me a second here to open that up. So inside of the data directory for TeamCity, right next to the plugins folder and actually the backup folder is a new import folder. If it's not there, you can create it. And then inside of that import folder, I can take the backup from the other server and drop it in there. And then if I reload the project import tab, I can do a new import. And then I can select from this import from, and you'll see there's that backup we just created. So 17.1337, let's just make sure that that's the right one. Yep, 17.1337, that's one we just dropped in. I can select that then. I'll hit the configure import scope, which allows me to specify what I'd like to bring in. And I just want to bring in that Linux build. Now I backed up a server that didn't have much on it. If you had done a backup that had a lot of other stuff on it, you could then pick exactly what it is you want to import. So you don't have to bring everything in. And then down in the scope settings here, you'll see a couple of options for what you want to import. Now I'm going to turn off users and groups, but you can actually also bring across users and groups as well. And then there's some settings for how you import the projects and the history of those projects. I can then start that import process. And then when it's done, it gives me some information about the import process, a little log here. And we'll come back to this in a minute. But I should be able to just open up the projects. I'll leave that open so we can come back to that. And now I've got a new Linux build that I just imported. I'm going to bring that to the visible projects here. And you can see there's that build configuration. Even number 19, that build that we just ran over on this other server. Go back to that. This is the other server, the original server. Build number 19, successful. Build number 19, successful. So just like that, I was able to back up and import some projects from another server right within the TeamCity web UI. And I'll stop and see if there's any questions before I move on again.
Hi, Wes. So yeah, there are some questions, and there are actually a lot of them, but thankfully Pavel is handling them as well. Pavel is a member of the TeamCity team. He's our team lead. The question about import is from Oliver Crockett. Can I import a TeamCity 8 backup in TeamCity 9?
And back me up on this, but I believe the imports need to be between the same version, but I could be wrong. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I see Pavel just answered that.
Yeah, you should. So you have to back up and restore from the same version of TeamCity. And part of that is because in TeamCity 9, build logs are, for example, handled a little differently. So different versions of TeamCity, things are handled and stored differently. So you'll want to be backing up and restoring from the same version of TeamCity. And speaking of that, actually can segue into, and if you have another question, I'll come right back to it. When you run this import, a folder is created in the TeamCity logs. And inside of that, here's the one for today, there's actually some scripts that can help you move the artifacts because a backup doesn't contain artifacts. So in the process of generating the import, TeamCity will spit out these scripts here. And then if the destination server has access to the original artifacts, you can use these scripts then to copy them over as well. And artifacts also contains the build logs now. So if you want those to be brought over in the process as well, then you can use this script to finish the process. Again, streamlining things here for you because this is stuff you would have had to figure out a way to do this by hand in the past. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I will move on. Feel free to interrupt me if something comes up. Okay, so typically people will have a TeamCity server and they're going to have some fixed capacity of agents, right? So they've got some perhaps physical or virtual machines locally that are just dedicated to the purpose of always running builds, whatever those contain. In the past, you've had the capability to have flexible capacity as well with EC2. So you could spin up extra agents on demand based on the load and then tear them down as well. In the in version 9, and actually kind of out of band with a set of plugins, there are two new mechanisms of support for this flexible capacity, and that's Azure, which we're going to go over in a minute here, but also vSphere as well. So you could not only be spinning up flexible capacity or spinning up build agents on demand on EC2 now, you can also be using plugins for Azure and vSphere. And so we'll look at what this can facilitate. I'm going to close a few things here. So I've got this server up in the cloud, actually. This is my demonstration server for the Azure stuff. And you don't have to have it in the cloud. You could have it on-premise. But I've just put it up there for simplicity purposes for me. What I'm going to show you then is my Azure interface to my VMs. So inside of here, you can see I only have one VM right now. It's that TeamCity 9 server that I've been using so far in the demonstration. That's the only thing I have running. Now inside of that TeamCity server, though, you can and you can see and confirm in the interface here, there are no agents right now, theoretically, but there's also nothing in the build queue, so that's not a problem. Now I've got this Linux build that we copied, and it's nothing complicated. It's just dumping out a message. We'll look at that in a minute here. I can trigger this to be run, and you'll notice when I push that, something queued up in the build process, but it also didn't give me that yellow warning that you would normally get if you had no agents. And that's because I have a cloud profile set up so that there isn't capacity to run the current builds that are queued up. TeamCity can take care of them launching a new agent for us that will then handle that build. And then after some idle period, we'll tear things down. Now this takes about 45 seconds to actually get Azure's interface to update and show that a new VM is running. But I want to sit here and talk a little more while that's, and see if we can't get that to refresh and show you that new VM spinning up. So right now, TeamCity has gone out to Azure, and oh, there you go. It's told it to spin up a new VM. It's called Azure 5. As these are spun up, the number increments 6, 7, 8 thereafter. So it's spun that up so it can handle that build that I would like to run. Again, all I had to do was trigger a build process. And I did that right from the interface, but this could be automatic as well if you had a version control check-in, for example. Inside the TeamCity interface, if I want to see what's going on, I can click on the Agents tab. And you can see there's still nothing connected right now. But under the Cloud tab, you'll notice there's a little one bubble. So there's an image coming online, in the cloud for us. There's that Azure 5 we were talking about. And you can actually control these instances right from here. So I could even stop this instance. But I'm going to leave it be so it actually runs through things here once it gets online. Now, this is a Linux instance for this demo, but it could be anything. So the process whereby you set up a cloud profile is just to go out to Azure, build out your agent machine, and create an image of it. That's one of the routes, actually. And so I've got this TeamCity agent image out in Azure. It's just a machine image with everything installed on it, the version of Java I need, all my build tools, and it's also connected up to the TeamCity server, and it's got the latest version of the TeamCity agent. So that on demand, I can spin this thing up, and as fast as it can start up, it can start handling builds for me. And then I can tear it down once it's no longer needed. So that's just facilitated by literally creating a disk image of what a server should be booted off of. And it takes about 2.5 minutes in this example to get this connected. So I'm going to continue to wait here so we can actually see things happening. To set all of this up, there's actually a couple of things involved. First of which is you'll want to grab the plugins. There are 2 plugins, depending on what you want, for Azure or for vSphere. And in this case, I preloaded both of those. And then you have cloud profiles. I'm not going to go into the one I have set up just so I don't accidentally show something sensitive here, but I can go ahead and create a new profile to kind of talk through some of this. So I can create a new profile, and you can see that I can give it a name then. So you can have multiple profiles for perhaps different cloud types or even for the same cloud type. And you can see with the plugins, then I have Azure and VMware vSphere available. And let's say I would like to just select Azure. Then I provide my credentials to access Azure, and then I can reference an image. And that's really all that's involved in the process of setting up a cloud profile. Come back here and see if we've got anything done yet. Oh, looks like it's done actually. So you can see the agent is now connected and it must have run the build already. So we missed that, but we can go look and see that actually. So we'll hop back to the home page. You'll see build 20 now. 19 was where it was at before. I can click on that particular build. And I'm going to go to the settings and show you what I have that build doing. Go to the build step. Just a command line step. All it's dumping out is the agent name, just to prove that it actually ran on that new agent. So I can go back then from the settings, close the settings out, go back to the 20. This was build number 20. Go to the build log, and I should see hello from Azure 5. So in the process of all of that, I triggered a new build, which then TeamCity went out and spun up a new build agent, and the build agent went through and ran my build for me, all on demand. And again, this would work with EC2. You had that historically, now Azure and vSphere as well. Any questions?
Yeah, Wes, there are a couple of questions. Yeah, there are a couple of questions regarding the licensing. How does the license model works for cloud agents?
As far as TeamCity or Azure, I assume TeamCity, right?
Yeah, TeamCity licensing.
Yeah, so you have a pool of licenses for agents available. So if I go to the Agents tab, and I go to Unauthorized, you'll see, for example, that I have 2 agent licenses left. So as agents connect, you essentially use up your licenses. The nice thing is, as you tear them down, those licenses become available again then. So one scenario this enables, not only can you save on capacity within Azure, right? Because you may have like 50 build agents that you need at some point in time, but you don't, maybe like normally you only need 20. So you can get rid of those 30 transient build agents and save a lot of CPU time on Azure, which turns into dollars, right? But also, you may have different types of build agents, right? So let's say you need 30 Windows build agents today, and tomorrow you need 30 Linux agents, and then the next day you need 30, I don't know, Mac agents, whatever it may be. Theoretically, then, if you're using cloud profiles, you would only need 30 licenses then, because you would only have 30 build agents running at any one time, so you could swap them in and out. So one of the nice things is your licenses are like a pool. As agents are spun up and torn down, they just pull from that pool of licenses. And Stop me if I'm completely wrong on that, but that's how I kind of see that being a potential advantage. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
Yep. So lots of different.
Yeah, there is another question from Bill Smith. He's asking, can the on-demand agents be used with on-premise vCenter?
I mean, yes, that's the with the vSphere plugin. I don't have a demonstration of that. If you're using vSphere now, it would be a matter of spinning up agents wherever your vSphere or vCenter in this case is located at. Yep. Versus Azure and EC2, which are more cloud-based. You don't have any of that capacity or infrastructure inside.
Yeah, that's it for questions for now.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next part. Oops, we're not ready for that yet, actually. I'm out of slides for some of this. Some of this I just kind of want to walk through these examples and show you things. The next thing I want to go over are custom charts. I'm going to jump over to a project I already have set up. I've got this build configuration called page speed custom statistic. And I've already run this a few times just so we have some history here. I'll go to the configuration settings for this and just look at what this is doing. Again, to keep everything simple, I'm just outputting a message. In this case, I'm trying to generate a pseudo-random number, if you will. And I'm using that as a custom statistic. So I'm using a TeamCity service message to output a custom build statistic called page load time. And I'm just random number. Now, in reality, what would be going on is perhaps you have a testing framework that, like Google's page speed score, for example, that reports some meaningful number to you that you would like to keep track of for every build throughout history. Well, you've been able to do that with statistic values forever now, but it's been some work to set up a chart then to show that within TeamCity if that's a custom statistic. Now, if we go to this build configuration and we go to the home for it, we have a history already here, so we've run this 6 times. So I'm just going to go look at the statistics tab, and you'll see that there's no statistics for this because this is my own custom statistic, so there's no chart for this. If I go back to the history and I click on one of these past build results, in fact, I can run this again just to make this more interesting. And under the parameters tab, you may not have been aware, but you can actually go to the reported statistics for a build under the parameters tab. And you can see even your own custom statistics. Here's that page load time I added. And I can get a chart of that, and you can see that chart here, and that's all fine and dandy, but if I would like this chart to be out on that home page, well, in the past, you'd have to go edit XML files to do that. Scroll down here. Now you can actually add that to the home page instead. So, and to do that, sorry, close this out. Just come back here and check this box next to the page load time. And if you have multiple of these statistics, you could check multiple of these. This is one way you can go about doing this. And then you get an option to add it either to the build configuration chart or the project chart. I'm going to add it to the build configuration chart. That means it's going to show up on the builds statistics page instead of a chart on the project level. And then I can give this my own little title, but I'm going to leave this generic title here because we'll change that in a minute. So I'm going to save this. That generates a new chart and actually even gives you a little link to it right away, so I don't have to click all over to get to it. Click on that, see that new chart, and here's my new chart title. Not too exciting, but now you can see the page speed score and the different values of that. So your own custom statistics now show up as under the statistics tab for your build configuration. And you can even edit these from within here. So I can give this a more meaningful title. I could say page speed. So all from within the TeamCity interface, you can set up your own custom charts and change them. You can even delete them if you don't want them anymore. All right, any questions before I move on?
No, there are no unanswered questions, so everything that was asked is Oh, there's
Fantastic.
one. Yeah, there's one. Is it
Oh,
possible to have time instead of a build number on the x-axis? Asked by Oliver.
to show the time that these were run at, or the duration, or something like that.
Time instead of build number. Yeah.
I guess I don't know if that was like the page speed time or something like that, or the build number. I've only ever used these with build numbers, so unless somebody knows on the call another way to do that, we might be able to do this. No, that's actually that's the format of this, the measurement of the number. The number itself is just an integer, so that doesn't make any sense. So I'm not aware of changing this to show like the build time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Pavel is pinging me, and he's saying that no, we cannot, and there are only build numbers there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially as you get a lot of builds. Like this is only 7. As you get lots and lots of builds, even within a month, you might have quite a few. Yeah, you'll get a lot of build numbers in here crammed together, and it might be hard to see the time even if you do start showing that. Yeah. Usually what people are looking for, the trend is like, if this were test results, for example, like this is a page speed, all of a sudden our pages, assuming 100 is good and 25 is bad, what we really want to see here is, oh my gosh, what happened in this build number 7 that caused our page speed score to tank? Or on some of these others, people have been using it like the build duration, why did it skyrocket? Or why did the number of test failures skyrocket? All right. Under the administration section.
Another one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one more from Andrew. Does TeamCity has the possibility to show charts with time that took to run every test?
Yeah, so if you're running tests, you'll get some tests. You'll get some test metrics already. I believe it's going to be about success and failure. If you want to, for whatever reason, log some special metric of everything or even like a subset of tests, again, you could report that as a custom statistic, and then you could build your own chart with that. And if you want to know what's available already for any particular build configuration, what I recommend is going to your history, open the last build result, go to the parameters tab, go to the reported statistic values, and you'll see what's available. Yeah, because as you turn things on like certain test runners, then you'll have certain information come in here as well. Okay, a couple of little odds and ends. The first thing is favorited builds. So I have this Linux build that I ran. If for some reason I'm investigating this, let's say this had blown up actually, I could come into this and I could go into this build result number 20, and I could, or sorry, number 19, and I could add this to the favorites. What that does then is under my username, I have my favorite builds now. And this then becomes a list of builds that I'm looking into. So you can add things as you're working on them. But not only that, you can actually, any builds that you trigger yourself, you can set TeamCity up to add builds triggered by me to the favorites as well. So if I do that and save that, and then I go back to the projects, and let's just run this one again. And then I go back to my favorited builds. Or if I actually triggered that. There we go, that's running for sure now. Maybe I have something set up wrong there. Anyways, when you trigger builds yourself, then say a personal build, then they would come in here as well. Again, so I want to go over a bunch of little things. I'm going to move on to the next one here. Under the administration section, there is a new build time report. If you're interested in looking at, say, for example, the last 24 hours, where the time has been spent to see if you have a particular build, like say you're running close to your resources and you'd like to maybe improve something, you can come in here and look for areas for potential improvement then. So you could run this report as of a period and see how much time was spent on different build configurations. The cleanup of projects. First off, And I'm going to hop back to the projects for this. I'm going to pick one of these projects. There's now a tab for cleanup rules embedded under project settings. Before, this was all under administration, even though you could set this up, but this was now embedded under project settings for cleanup rules. So you tie your rules to a particular project. And not only that, TeamCity 9 also makes the cleanup process asynchronous to run in the background. So if you have already experienced a situation where you have just tons and tons and tons of old builds that you're trying to clean up, and it locks things up in historical versions, now they'll run asynchronously in the background, so it doesn't inhibit you from using TeamCity in the process. Also, with new project settings, if you will, is that you can correlate issue trackers directly with a particular project. So it's, again, in the hierarchy of projects and sub-projects, you can attach issue trackers. In the past, this was a global setting. There's also support for 7-zip in your build artifacts. So if you've been zipping up artifacts in the past, now you can zip up artifacts as 7-zip archives. And one other little thing that's hard really to show, except that you just kind of would see it, is that the web UI for TeamCity has now been rewritten when possible to use WebSockets instead of polling for updates. So when TeamCity refreshes the interface to show you a build is running and here's the current status, things like that now leverage WebSockets, which can help in situations where you have a lot of people connecting to a TeamCity server. And just helps out with the performance of the interface then. I'll stop and see if there are any questions so far.
No unanswered questions so far.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, the last little demo piece that I want to go into is looking at meta runners. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slides for this. Oops, I'm going backwards and not forwards. So in the past, meta runners have been a way to extract a build configuration or part of a build configuration and make something reusable about it. So it's kind of in this middle ground between every time you set up a build having to set up all of everything, like basically duplicating everything every time you do it, or an alternative to the route of making build configuration templates. I like to look at it as a way of, meta runners are kind of a way to compose builds, short of actually having to write your own special plugin. In the past, you've been able to do this. The problem is once you extract a meta runner from a build configuration, you're stuck editing XML if you want to make any changes to it. And that may be fine for simple changes, but it might be nice to get back to the original build configuration interface when you want to modify it. In TeamCity 9 now, you can pull out a build configuration from a meta runner. So you can kind of reverse the process and go back to a build configuration, make changes to that build configuration with the interface of TeamCity itself, and then re-extract that back into a meta runner. So you can overwrite the meta runners with modifications from a build configuration. Then that way you don't have to deal with editing XML to make the changes you need to a meta runner. Now again, there may be situations where you need to make a little quick tweak, like in a message. That's not a problem. But if you're doing something more complex and you're refactoring a meta runner, this might be a nice approach to pull it into a build configuration, use the interface to do your changes very quickly and concisely, and then extract back into a meta runner to avoid making mistakes in the XML that you're editing. So we can go through a little example of that. Now I've got this TeamCity 9 project, and I've got a meta runners, I've got a meta runner extracted already. Again, I like to keep this simple. I'm calling this a message runner. All it really does is, again, like I've been showing thus far, is dump out a message in the process that says custom message, and then it dumps out whatever message you provide to this runner. So it'll make more sense if we look at a usage of this. So I'm going to go to the home page for this project, and I'm going to go into this. I have this build configuration using the message runner, cleverly named so that we can understand what this does. I can hop to the settings for this. Oops, go to build steps, and you can see I've got a build step in here called message runner. So that meta runner is, if you haven't used them yet, they're like little run types. And if you click on this, you'll even see the familiar runner type dropdown. Here's all the built-in runners that come with either built-in components of TeamCity or plugins that you've added. Then there's also the meta runners down here at the bottom. So I've got this existing project using the message runner. The message is set to Wes right now. So when I run this then, go to the home page for this. And then I click on the result of that. Sorry, that ran really quickly. And I go to the build log. You'll see that it says custom message : Wes. So all the meta runner does is plug in steps into an existing build process and do things. And then the nice thing is you get this really simple interface where a user just needs to pass in parameters to that meta runner. That behind it may be this really complex script or composition of other components that you don't want to have to set up every single time you set up a build configuration. But now let's say I want to modify this message runner. I don't want it to show custom message. I want it to just say message : or any change you could theoretically come up with for it. So I could go back to the project page, go under the meta runners. I can click on this meta runner to edit it. Now before I could have edited this XML, and this is not a drastic change. I could do this right here. But if it were more complex, I might want to spin up a build configuration from this instead of editing XML. And to do that, I'm going to hop back then to this screen, and there's an option in here to create a build configuration from a meta runner. So I'm going to take my meta runner, and I'll go back to my slides so I can explain this. I'm going to take my meta runner and spin up a build configuration again from it. I'll do that, and I'll just call this build configuration edit the message runner. Create that. Now I can go to that build step. And again, I can use the regular interface. See, this was composing a command line runner type. And here's the script. So now I can come in and edit this as if it were a regular build runner. I could do anything really. I could change the build step to something else. So now it's going to echo message, and then : and then %message, etc. All right. And then I can go, now that I'm done with my change, and I could run this if I wanted to test it. That's the other nice thing. I could test this within this little configuration. Let's go ahead and do that actually. So I could run this as a part of my edit the message runner build configuration. Test the process and make sure it's okay. Yep, it just has message now, not custom message. Once I'm happy with it, then I can go back to the settings for this temporary build configuration, and I can extract a meta runner from it. And instead of edit the message runner, I'll keep the naming the same. So what you need to do when you want to replace a meta runner is make sure that the ID is the same. So TeamCity 9 message runner is the ID of the other one. So this should go ahead and replace it. And so now the message runner has been updated. You can even see if I look at the XML here, it's already updated. But just to prove that it still works with that build configuration that was using this, and you may have 20 or 30 build configurations using this. So once you update it, they're all updated then. So let's see that. Let's go back to let's go to the home page for this project, sorry. And let's run this one again. So let's run the one build configuration using the message runner. So we haven't done anything to this. We've just updated the meta runner involved. And now if I go to the build log, you can see it doesn't say custom message anymore. It says just message. So again, to just wrap that up, because I know there's a couple of steps involved there. Instead of editing XML, you now can spin up a build config off of a meta runner and then write it back to the meta runner. And then everything that uses that meta runner will just be updated automatically to use whatever the newest version of that meta runner. Just like before, if you had edited the XML, everything would get the update to it. But now you can use the nice interface of TeamCity to make your changes instead of needing to modify XML, which you could make a mistake. You might not know what you need to do in the XML, etc. Whereas the TeamCity interface is pretty straightforward. All right, and I'll pause and see if there are any questions at this point.
Yeah, there are some questions, but they're all being answered by the team members. So
Fantastic.
continue, I think.
I don't have to do anything else. That's actually all I have as far as demonstration purposes for the big features, at least inside of TeamCity. About the only other thing I could demonstrate is that, at some point this agent will be idle and we could force it to be killed. So back in the cloud Azure scenario, I could stop this agent. And then eventually you're going to see that go away. So we can go through the process of that. But TeamCity would clean those up as well. Again, that's part of the cloud configuration. It's one thing I didn't get into, was specifying when you want instances to terminate after how much time. And of course it hasn't been 30 minutes yet, but it would have terminated after that. Or you can also terminate your instances after a first build is finished. There's actually two different scenarios with the Azure plugin. First of which I talked about was using an image to spin up new VMs and then terminate them. You could also just have VMs out in Azure that you've already set up. So these are existing VMs out in Azure. You've just turned them off because you don't want them running all the time. TeamCity can turn them on, run builds, and then turn them off. So if you don't want your Azure deployment of build agents to have to spin up a new agent and go through that whole process, even though it's pretty quick if things are relatively updated on that agent image. If you don't want to have to go through that process of spinning up and tearing down, you could just have existing VMs set up but turned off in Azure, and then TeamCity can turn them on. So that's another route. And then once the build's done, it can turn them off. Yeah, unless there are other questions, though, I think we've hit on the major features of TeamCity 9. Is there anything else that anybody can think of that we'd like to show off?
We actually had a lot of them. I think we can wrap it up.
Okay, yeah, let's wrap up. Send in questions if you have them.
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, any questions, you can send them directly to Wes. We have his contacts in the announcements. We'll also have the recording of this webinar posted on our blog, blog.jetbrains.com/TeamCity. So check it out too, if you want to share it with a colleague of yours, for example. Also follow us on Twitter at TeamCity. We'll have all the announcements there. So thank you, Wes. Thanks for presenting and showing the new features of TeamCity 9. And thanks everyone for attending this webinar. We hope you enjoyed it.